Dames en heren, kijkers en luisteraars. Alle participanten die onze uitzending wederom volgen via de Zoom, van harte goedenavond. De KKF in samenwerking met onder andere de Stichting Verbruikersraad Suriname en Ramp Logistics heeft het genoegen u weer deze presentatie te brengen tot in de huiskamer. Voor al diegenen die deze uitzending volgen via de Zoom, van harte welkom eveneens. Waarom zijn we weer hier? Waarom zijn we weer bij u in de huiskamer? We weten dat al vanaf januari 2020 Suriname in een euforische stemming is met betrekking tot de gevonden of de ontdekte oliebronnen in onze offshoregebied voor onze kust. Tussen januari 2020 tot recentelijk nog juni-juli zijn er in totaal 5 potentiële oliebronnen en 1 gasbron reeds in kaart gebracht. De grote vraag en de zaken die nou allemaal worden uitgewerkt betreffen data en exact uitzoeken wat moeders natuur ons daar heeft geschonken als land, als natie, wat allemaal daar onder de zeebodem ligt. De Kamer van Koophandel van oudsher, met een geschiedenis van meer dan 100 jaren, is de organisatie, zoals u weet, om het Surinaams ondernemerschap maximaal te accommoderen, te faciliteren, te ondersteunen, maar ook ready awareness bij te brengen en ready te maken voor de ontwikkelingen die gaan komen. In dit kader moet u deze presentatie zien welke wij aan u zullen aanbieden. En de titel spreekt voor zich: Opportunities in the Oil and Gas Sector for Suriname's Business Community. U moet ook rekening houden dat deze presentatie voornamelijk in het Engels zal zijn, omdat deze Zoom-sessie in simultaan met de tv-uitzending van Apinti ook internationaal te volgen is in de volgende landen: Guyana, Trinidad, Curaçao en Nederland. En de bedoeling is dat we onze buitenlandse partners en luisteraars en participanten natuurlijk ook tegemoet gaan komen. Dus daarom zal er het grootste gedeelte van deze presentatie zich in het Engels vertalen naar u allen. Ik wil bij deze even het panel aan u voorstellen, alvorens door te gaan. Het panel dat hier aan tafel zit en van wie iedereen bij u één voor één een bijdrage zal leveren tijdens deze Zoom en sessie en tv-uitzending, zijn links van mij, om te beginnen, meneer Jafet Razak, Vice President of Rams Logistics. Daar hebben we in het midden de heer Eddie Frenkel, Director Power and Sustainable Energy van Staatsolie Maatschappij Suriname. En aan het eind van de tafel zit onze voorzitter van de KKF, meneer Jayan Padarat. Welkom heren. En als u me toestaat wil ik heel even dan nu onze Engelse volgers en participanten even toespreken. Dear distinguished participants in Guyana, Trinidad, Curaçao, and other countries who are following this Zoom session, the Chamber of Commerce of Suriname is warmly welcome you to this Zoom session. As you know, Suriname has done a lot of oil finds in our offshore basin, and everything is now focusing on what nature has in store for us, what is lying down under the seafloor. The Chamber of Commerce, who is longer than 110 years busy with developing and stimulating and supporting the business community of Suriname, has taken the lead not to wait until all details and all data will be in place. But the Chamber of Commerce of Suriname has decided to become a part of the history making of the oil and gas industry of Suriname. That's the reason that you have been invited to participate to this Zoom session, because we want to have a very wide range of participants to come and to support and understand all the developments that will happen within the coming years. Thank you so much for this participation. I want to make one thing clear, that because of the shortness of this broadcast, there is no possibility to send your questions in by WhatsApp or by calling. It's only possible through the Zoom link, the Zoom that you have to place your questions in front. And at the end of this broadcast, all the members, the participants within this panel will address your questions as far as possible. If, because of the time range, we run out of time and we have to shut down to the live broadcast, don't worry, we will go further to the internet channels and the Zoom and try to give you the best answers on your questions. Now I want to ask your attention for a very important contribution of Mr. Maniram Prasad, President of the Guyana Oil and Gas Energy Chamber, who is now in Houston, Texas, and which will address you with his contribution. Attention for Mr. Maniram.
President of the Suriname Chamber of Commerce, other presenters at this forum, members of the Suriname Chamber, and all other participants, let me say I'm honored to address this forum. I'm currently in Houston at the OTC conference. The Guyana Oil and Gas Energy Chamber was established in 2017 when the oil and gas sector started to grow into a major sector in the Guyanese economy. The Chamber's main aim is to ensure all Guyanese benefit from the oil and gas industry, which includes local and international companies operating in the oil and gas sector and in the support services sector also, in the oil and gas value chain. GOGEC believes that with the proper use and management of the resources and new wealth generated, the country can benefit and thrive on a path of sustainable economic development. One of the main focus of the Guyana Oil and Gas Energy Chamber is to ensure that we educate all Guyanese about this new industry by hosting several seminars, trade missions, and expositions throughout the entire country. We also plan to conduct regionally and international symposiums to attract investors to fill the gap in these areas where there are opportunities. GOGEC strategic priority areas are to ensure that there are equal opportunities for all the operators and potential operators within the industry, to ensure the revenue generated from the sector contributes to sustainable and economic growth and development of Guyana and all Guyanese, to continue to strive to enhance the Chamber's ability to better serve its members whilst operating as a self-sustaining, non-profit and a political organization, and to promote trade, investment, and knowledge transfer within the energy sector to all members and stakeholders. The Guyana Oil and Gas Energy Chamber has signed Memorandum of Understanding to collaborate and establish closer relations with the following key organizations: the Suriname Chamber of Commerce, which is to collaborate in joint ventures to facilitate and energize trade and economic activities between Suriname and Guyana. The Ghana Upstream Petroleum Chamber, to facilitate collaboration that will lead to an exchange of information and share of resources between the two chambers. Let me briefly summarize. 1. ExxonMobil current production in Guyana is 120,000 barrels per day. However, production capacity will be ramped up to reach 1 million barrels per day by the end of the decade. Let me end by saying thanks once again to the President and executives of the Suriname East Chamber of Commerce for inviting me to say a few words, and I look forward to more collaboration of this kind in the future. Thank you.
Dat was de bijdrage van meneer Maniram Prasad, president of the Guyana Oil and Gas Energy Chamber. Het is heel belangrijk dat u ook dit meeneemt, beste kijkers en luisteraars. Dat u ook weet dat de Kamer van Koophandel en Fabrieken reeds Memorandum of Understandings heeft getekend met zowel Trinidad als Guyana. Met de Kamer van Koophandels van Guyana en Trinidad om zoveel als mogelijk samen op te trekken. We hebben ons heel veel de afgelopen tijd gefocust op local contents. Wat zal Suriname's rol worden? Waarin zal Suriname allemaal kunnen inkomen? Want de local content is niks anders dan de eigen bijdrage wat vanuit het eigen land zou kunnen worden geleverd voor deze veelbelovende sector. En uit hoofde daarvan krijgt u daar nu een presentatie van de heer Eddie Frenkel, Director of Power and Sustainable Energy, die hier in het panel zit en ons een betere inzicht zal geven over hoe de local content vorm kan krijgen. Meneer Frenkel, please.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Let me start by explaining Staatsolie's role. Staatsolie is the national oil company of Suriname. Staatsolie was instated by law as agent of the state, de facto the Petroleum Oil and Gas Institute of the country, and as such, Staatsolie has the role of the regulator. So, first of all, Staatsolie on behalf of the state of Suriname has signed production sharing agreements with the international oil companies active in our basin. So those production sharing agreements contain clauses on local content. In a broad sense, those clauses stipulate that the operators, the international oil companies, are obliged to procure goods and services from Suriname, local goods and services, provided that those can, of course, are available and they can be supplied at equal quality and cost. Yeah? So, Staatsolie, as in its role as a regulator, monitors the performance, call it the local content performance of these international oil companies. Besides that role, the performance monitoring, there is also the aspect of local content development. That is, let's say, interacting with local businesses and at one hand, and the international oil companies and their prime contractors at the other hand, to let's say to enhance the materialization, the actual, let's say, development of local content. And as such, the president of Suriname has tasked Staatsolie on its behalf to engage with those parties in local content development. So, in that role, the local content development role, Staatsolie has various, let's say, focus areas. I will elaborate on that further in a while. The other area where we also have a role, albeit not a prominent one, that is trying together with the government to entice entrepreneurs to let's say, to develop one or more shore bases to surface the offshore oil and gas. Recently, we saw in the news that a group already, let's say, announced their plan. But so we have, together with the government, been working to entice, let's say, entrepreneurs to that extent. As you may know, a shore base is actually the portal, the key element for access of local businesses to the offshore oil and gas industry. So it is of the utmost importance that you have a world-class shore base, yes, that is able to serve the oil and gas industry, and and very importantly, that this shore base is there in a timely manner. Because as you may know, you already announced that we have had these oil finds. The operator now active, let's say, towards development of these oil finds is Total Energies. And they have a program, yes, they are aiming to have first oil by 2025, which means that they are now working full speed ahead to achieve that. So you can imagine that various, let's say, services and goods are procured in order to achieve that goal of first oil in 2025. And it is of the utmost importance that a shore base, to facilitate, let's say, the current exploration and appraisal activities, as well as the development activities that will follow, that the shore base is of the utmost importance.
Thank you so much, Mr. Frankel. Thank you for your contribution. Als eerder gezegd, de KKF heeft duidelijk gekozen om niet aan de zijlijn te staan, maar om zelf onderdeel te worden van de geschiedschrijving rond deze hele nieuwe oil- en gas-industrie dat van de grond zal komen. We hebben net een bijdrage gehad van meneer Frankel en hij heeft ons al laten doorschemeren dat de local content zeer belangrijk gaat zijn. En dat is nou precies het punt waar de KKF tezamen met haar partners sterk aan zal trekken en werken om te zorgen dat wij als Surinaamse ondernemers een vinger in de pap krijgen. Maar het is een lange weg. Een lange weg die we te gaan hebben en een weg die we ook zullen aangrijpen, ongeacht de uitdagingen, om ten uitvoer te brengen. En daarom dat ik aan u introduceer als volgende spreker meneer Jayan Padarat, voorzitter van de KKF, om hieromtrent meer licht te doen schijnen. Meneer Padarat.
Dank u wel. Thank you. As a chair, we want to welcome all the participants, the business community, and the business community abroad also. For us as a chamber, we would like to get businesses who are involved in the oil and gas business to collaborate with each other and give an idea what's going on in the oil and gas business. So we found one of the companies who are registered at the chamber to give us an idea what's going on in the oil and business. How can Surinamese company participate in this oil and gas business, and how we can go in the future. Our next goal is when we have when Mr. Ramsik will give this presentation. The next goal is how to certify companies that they can do their business with the bigger company, the oil companies. So look next time for another presentation where we're gonna provide information how to get grants and to certify your company. I want to thank you for my introduction.
Thank you so much, President of the Chamber of Commerce of Suriname. Dear audience, you have heard it's a bumpy road, but not an impossible road. The Surinamese business community has to get ready to get on the chart, on the map, and to have their part in this big industry. I please ask you your attention, your kind attention, for the presentation of Mr. Javed Razak, left at my side, who is the Vice President as introduced before of RAMS Logistics, and they are the people with plenty of experience, and they are already knocking on the door. Mr. Jasap Razak, please, it's all yours.
All right, good evening. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the Chamber for this invite to speak to you guys this evening. 3 years ago, I gave a talk for the Chamber, and one of the things I mentioned was that Suriname is going to start having big oil and gas discoveries. And that was in 2018. And exploration was going on, but it wasn't yet successful. And some people were doubting that it would ever come. And I'm glad to say that in 2021, We have at least 5 discoveries so far, and as an extension of the Guyana Basin. We clearly see that the Suriname-Guyana Basin is one of the biggest, hottest areas in the world for exploration for oil and gas. So I have a couple of slides to go through, and I'll take you into some of the recent upstream activity in Suriname, what we can expect next, some lessons from Trinidad and Tobago as well as Guyana, and we want to talk a little bit about local content as well as job opportunities for Suriname. So just a disclaimer that all the information here is all within the public domain. Some things, hopefully, everything is correct, but everything may not be exactly accurate as well. So first, discoveries in the basin. We'll recap recent activity in Suriname, what a deep water project looks like, some local content lessons, direct and indirect job opportunities, and just some conclusions to wrap up our thoughts. So if you look at if you've been following the news in Guyana and Suriname, over the last 5 or 6 years, you'd find that all of these oil discoveries have taken place in the Stabroek block in Guyana and recently in the Block 58 with Total and Apache. And most people see that it tends to be along a linear trend, and one of the questions is why? Why is it that these discoveries happen in this manner? So, my background is geology, so I would give a geological sort of simple explanation to that. Basically, ancient river and canyon systems were filled with sand and buried thousands of feet deep millions of years ago. These sandstone channels, these river channels, filled with sand and encased in impermeable clays, is now what acts as reservoirs for the oil and gas. So these are the reservoirs, these are the things that the operators are actually drilling to. This is what they are looking for. And the oil and gas itself, of course, is produced by microorganisms buried millions of years ago that have been cooked into oil and into gas, right? This oil and gas then migrates, they move sideways, they move upwards through faults and so on into these reservoirs and become trapped. And these are the seismic surveys, other drilling is used to find these reservoirs. So I have an illustration here. The map on the right shows some of the discoveries, more or less. And I have a canyon channel fill here that kind of shows what the shape of some of these reservoirs looks like. So that's just to give you guys a flavor of that. Let's summarize what's happened in Guyana so far, right? It's more than 20 oil fields have been discovered, right? Mainly by Exxon in their massive Stabroek block. Almost 10 billion barrels of recoverable oil has been found, right? An incredible amount. They currently have planned 6 FPSOs by 2027, and that's the floating production, storage, and offloading vessels. I have the Liza Destiny here on the screen. That's the one that's currently producing. And they think that they can have up to 10 for the current fields that have been found. So the first FPSO, the one on the left, it's currently producing 120,000 barrels a day. The second one is on track for 2022. It's going to produce up to 220,000 barrels a day. The third one for 2024, also 220,000 barrels per day. And it's going to continue like that probably until the end of the decade, as the speaker before said that they expect to be up to 1 million barrels by the end of the decade, right? One of the things that makes the Guyana oil so attractive is that it has a low break-even price. Once the worldwide oil price is between $25 to $35 per barrel, they will be making money once it's above that, which is quite low, some of the lowest in the world actually for deep water developments. And Suriname, it should not be very much more than that. It should be very much along the same lines. So the Guyana-Suriname basin, and geologically it's one big basin, is one of the last mega basins for oil and gas in the world. As we see many companies and many countries moving away from hydrocarbon sources, this, with its low break-even price, with the massive size of the finds, will be one of the last big basins in the world that is exploited for oil and gas. So the next slide I have up here is an important one. It shows the current maritime acreage of Suriname and the different blocks and the operators that operate these blocks. So you'll see the companies that you've been hearing about for quite a while on this: Apache, Total, Exxon, Petronas, Tullow, Shell, Cairn, and Chevron, right? Chevron and Total have recently won 3 blocks, blocks 5, 6, and 8, the ones closer to the shore, pictured over here. That was in a bid round that Statsuli would have conducted and completed this year. There have been 4 independent discoveries by Apache and Total in Block 58. In Block 58 from 2020 to present, and 1 in 2020 by Petronas in Block 52. So there's quite a bit of upcoming drilling, within the next year. Cosmos, who has drilled in 2018 in 2 blocks in Suriname, they've sold their acreage to Shell. Of course, we know Shell, massive multinational, and they will be drilling in Block 42, the one in purple, in 2022. Apache, I understand, is going to drill in Block 53, the one in pink, in 2022, right? And they have handed over their operatorship of Block 58 to Total beginning in 2021. Petronas may be coming back to drill most likely in 2022 as well, those blocks in red. And then there should be new seismic and so on in the next 2 years from the operators that haven't drilled yet, such as Exxon. So just as a recap on some of the discoveries that has happened so far, since 2017 there's been 16 wells drilled by different companies, including the state Statsuli, and 5 of them so far have been what we call discoveries. The last one in yellow here is the one that's currently being drilled by Total. I don't think they've disclosed that as yet. About 1.5 billion barrels of oil equivalent has been found so far in these 5 discoveries, compared to the 10 billion or so that's been found by Exxon over about 20 discoveries. So what's next for Total? The schematic you see here is the Liza field setup, the subsea field setup, and more than likely Total is going to do something similar. So what it is that the ship there is the FPSO. It's connected by flow lines and umbilicals to manifolds that sit on the seabed, and those manifolds are all connected to different wells that are drilled, some for production of oil, some for re-injection of water and gas. So they re-inject water and gas into the reservoirs, help keep the pressure up and produce the oil. So 2 rigs are going to be drilling continuously throughout 2022. There's going to be seismic in Block 58 next year, and then as Eddie said here, in 2025 they're looking at first oil. So when we look at a deep water project, what are the major components of cost, right? And this is some rough numbers here. So the seismic and the drilling accounts for about 30% or so of these projects, right? All those wells and so on that are being drilled. The subsea infrastructure, the stuff I showed on the slide before, all those manifolds and flow lines, umbilicals and so on, about 25% of the cost. The FPSO, the vessel itself, maybe 1/3, about 33%. The operator spends maybe 2% or less, on its normal costs. But the big one that I mentioned as well is on the shore base and logistics, which is probably up to about 10%. That's the one that local companies can get quite a lot of work in, since they are not specialized to be able to do subsea infrastructure and so on at this stage. So locals can get actual employment throughout the entire supply chain. They can get work on the FPSO and all the different factions, but the shore base and logistics is probably the easiest entry point. And it's where companies like Ramps plays a major role. So this is a nice picture of the Kulip shore base that exists right now in Paramaribo. And this shore base has actually supported more or less all the drilling campaigns over the last couple of years that have worked in Suriname. A lot of the shore base activity has come from Trinidad and has been supported as well through Kulip here in Suriname. And why is a shore base so important? It provides the actual quayside where these vessels come. The vessels take their supplies, pipe, drilling tools, drilling fluid, cement, food, waste, everything that comes on and off at these quaysides. One of the major things that you need to look for is that you need to have enough depth of water to accommodate these large vessels. That's one of the major restrictions in Guyana and Suriname because of the rivers, right? And one of the advantages for Trinidad in that regard. So when we talk about building shore bases, we want deep enough water to accommodate these vessels. right? And of course, you'll see in the schematic here, warehousing space, lay down space, a lot of big, large facility that you need for different things. So what are some of the lessons learned from Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana when it comes to local content, right? And I mean, Trinidad has had local content guidelines for a long time that have never really been well enforced, right, to be honest. Guyana now has a drafted local content policy, and it's quite detailed. It's available to the public. You can read that. A lot of the companies in Guyana, majority of them are either branches of multinationals, partnerships with local and foreign companies, or what I call CARICOM-owned companies such as ramps. The goal, though, should be to maximize, two major goals, to maximize local employment in all these different types. So whether it's Total, whether it's a company like ours, whether it's a local owned company, they should have as many Surinamese as possible working in these companies. And the second major goal should be to facilitate new and existing local owned businesses to enter the services sector. So that is the two major things. You want actual Surinamese working in these companies, all of them, but you want as many locally owned companies as possible to be entering the sector. And they can enter in different ways. It can be done on their own. They can come through consortiums, joint ventures, or other types of partnerships, right? Similar thing is going on in Guyana right now. So these foreign companies, they bring their processes, their technologies, and their people. And local companies in Suriname should not view that as a threat, but opportunities to learn and build, right? But at the same time, the government, and I guess through the regulatory arm of TATSOLI, must ensure that local companies get the opportunities to provide services and that they have access to information that will allow them to be competitive. If they don't have the access to information, then they may not be allowed to even to get into that at all. So when it comes to winning contracts, what are some of the things that need to be done, right? So it's all well and good to talk about local companies working in the sector, but you actually have to win contracts, right? And these contracts can be very simple, from taxis. They can be complicated to provide helicopters or oil spill response, right? But more or less, what has to happen in any of these cases is that they need to pre-qualify with the companies, and they need to pass health and safety requirements, quality and compliance, and so on, technical, commercial, and they must be able to do this in a timely manner, right? So I have some points over here you guys will see on the screen. I'm not going to read through it, but basically companies need to start focusing on HSE statistics, being able to track information, and so on. The chamber mentioned that they are trying to assist with getting companies certified, and they may be able to assist in the regard of helping companies figure out how they should go about structuring the HSE, which is health, safety, security, and the environment. On the technical side, of course, this is where companies can shine. If you are experienced providing catering or providing trucking, this is where you have all your technical information that companies want to see well documented. Quality and compliance, this is when you start talking about anti-bribery, anti-corruption, making sure that your people and your companies are certified, such as TRACE certified, and people are well trained in to make sure that bribery and corruption does not take place. ISO is a standard that we're all familiar with. It is a very difficult standard to attain, but there are ways to get there to advise companies how they can get to that stage. And even if they don't actually have ISO standard, if they operate within the same type of requirements, they will be considered and more than likely qualified to work. Of course, pricing must be competitive, right? You can't be the most expensive. You must be able to build relationships with these clients, with these potential companies. Network with them, use social media, get your name out there. The opportunities to build is not only with the operators, but all the services companies along the supply chain. And of course, as somebody who deals with tenders quite often, you have to be very, very responsive. If somebody asks for a tender and they give you a week to submit, you need to make sure you do that. You need to have teams in place that are able to meet those criteria. If you get your local companies to meet these different areas, you'll find that they'll be very, very strong and very competitive. So just a list here of some of the services that are needed. I separated it into personnel services, stuff like taxis, hotels, flights, and so on. Support in the office, which may be things like training, recruitment and manpower, security, IT, medical testing. Offshore support services, this is the big one that is involved in the shore base. Stuff like trucking, heavy lift equipment, freight forwarding, helicopters, boats, fuel, and so on. And then there's quite a few indirect services that will benefit coming out of oil and gas, as we would expect. The entertainment sector, shop and retail, public construction, legal services, airlines, telecommunications, the banking sector, vehicles, and so on. So this is just a snapshot of some of the services that are in demand already and will continue to get more in demand. And a list of some of the types of jobs, onshore jobs, offshore, as well as government roles that will become more and more important over the years, right? These are positions on rigs and vessels, in the shore bases, in the offices, and in the regulatory parts of the government, in the finance part, in the technical part, and so on. So my last slide is some thoughts, right? And I'll start with the one on the right, the one that's in big. That 1.5 billion barrels, at the current oil price of $70, the gross value of those recoverable resources is over 100 billion US, right? That is not a small amount of money in any country in the world. It is a massive amount, right? Of course, the cost of extracting the oil and gas it must be taken into account and so on, of course. But these are huge numbers that we're talking about, right? And Guyana is already about 5 or 6 times this. I expect the discoveries to continue in Suriname. Now, I have a couple points on the left-hand side I'll just run through very quickly. So I expect my discoveries to continue. It seems that they will. But some of them may be primarily gas-prone, right? It's quite a large possibility, and Petronas has already hinted towards that. If gas is being discovered and not just oil, we have to think about what can be done with it. And Trinidad has a good model of what can be done with gas. If you get it to shore, you can have quite a lot of downstream industries, right? So it's something that the government and the companies here need to consider. Are there commercial fields outside the current trend? So we saw that line we talk about. Other exploration has happened outside of that, both in Guyana and Suriname, and has so far been unsuccessful. So we have to think, will there be fields outside of that trend? Can the Staatsolie refinery refine any of the oil? Is it going to be exported like in Guyana, or is it possible that some can come into Suriname onshore? Not too sure about that. For fields close to shore, are we going to look at FPSOs or maybe pipelines? Inevitably, there are going to be fields that are cross-border between Guyana and Suriname, fields that extend on both sides. In Trinidad's case, we have similar fields with Venezuela that have never actually been produced for issues of diplomatic reasons and so on. How does Guyana and Suriname's government collaborate to make sure that these fields do not remain stranded? Is there an opportunity to share assets with Guyana? When they build shore bases and Suriname builds shore bases, is there an opportunity to share some of that, to share some of the helicopter services, the boats? Is there? Maybe, right? Of course, local content guidelines need to be put in place, and I know a lot of that is already well underway in terms of public consultation. Don't forget thinking about students coming out of university and high school. Where can they get training? Is it degrees? Where do they get technical degrees? Where do they get skills to be able to work offshore, even at the shore bases in terms of rigging and operating cranes, forklifts, these kind of things? Are there institutions set up or will be set up to ensure that they get the training they need? And to tie all these things together, you really do need strong regulation, right? Through the Staatsolie Hydrocarbon Institute and maybe other government agencies. You really need them to have the expertise, the skill, the manpower to be able to manage what's happening in Suriname. It's not small oil and gas anymore. It's really, really global scale. So those were some of my last thoughts. Hoping that you guys here, as well as maybe the audience, have some questions.
Thank you so much, Mr. Rasak. Until now, I get some questions in, but I don't know exactly to whom I have to address them. So I leave the choice to you both guys to take the addressing of these questions for any one of your part. One of the questions that came in is, with the experience that Staatsolie already has built up with local content, what kind of hurdles and challenges you are foreseeing for the Surinamese business community to get into that local content part? What is your experience about that?
Well, as my colleague here also already indicated in his presentation, obviously Surinamese businesses might have a gap, yeah, in let's say meeting compliance with HSE standards, procurement regulations, their financial administration, their governance, and whatnot. So for Surinamese businesses to, let's say, get qualified to supply goods or services to the operators and their prime and subcontractors, this gap will need to be closed. And one of the, let's say, endeavors that we as Staatswoelie, together with, let's say, relevant bodies undertake, is to establish a enterprise development center in Suriname. So we have an example already in Guyana. In Guyana, it is called the Center for Local Business Development. It is in Guyana. It is totally funded by Exxon. Yes, we are not, let's say, that fortunate here in Suriname. We are looking at funds, CSR funds from the offshore operators, the inter-IOCs, and also own funds, combined with own funds. So basically this Enterprise Development Center must work on this gap closing.
Okay, thank you so much. Mr. Rasak, people are very impressed with your presentation. They are asking where they can get a copy of this presentation of yours. Is it at the chamber or at Rams Logistics, where it will be available to pick up?
Yes, so I'll make it available definitely through the chamber, and the chamber will probably post it or email it out to everyone.
Okay. Another question that came in, Mr. Frankel, is a very strange question. I don't know how to approach this, but someone has put the question, how the Surinamese community can make profit out of all these oil finds and by getting a better price for gasoline and diesel at the pump, how we really can enjoy to have these oil finds and oil developments. Is it possible to get a better price at the pump to buy cheaper diesel and gasoline?
I mean, I guess that is a government policy, so not for me to address, but in a general sense, I would say gasoline and oil in each healthy economy is traded at world market prices.
I could comment on that as well.
Okay, maybe you can.
I'll give the Trinidad context. Our fuel has been, for years, one of the cheapest in the world. And it's facilitated a huge growth in sales of cars and so on. And now the government over the last few years have been scaling it back and reducing the subsidies slowly. And it's been found worldwide that these subsidies, while it seems good at first because you have cheap prices of fuel and people can travel cheaply, is that it disproportionately benefits the richer people. So what you see happening is that those who drive Range Rovers and Porsches end up benefiting the most from fuel subsidies rather than the people who really should be benefiting from it. So it's a dangerous road to go down. It's something to consider, of course, but it could become very difficult to manage in the long term, as we have experienced in Trinidad and are now trying to get under control.
Okay, Mr. Rasak, with your experience and what you know about the Surinamese business community, in which kind of areas or sectors you are seeing opportunities for the entrepreneurs to get in as local content?
So there are quite a few direct services required by the oil field, right? And a lot of them, as we mentioned a couple times before, will be centered around a shore base. So things like equipment, cranes, forklifts, trucking, food services, taxis, anything to do with immigration and so on. All of these are areas that are directly involved with the operators. But there are quite a lot of things that may not be so direct that companies can look at, especially when it comes to IT services, technology development, creating apps on your phone and so on. There are a lot of things that could be created easily by Surinamese, I think, right? Banking sector and so on as well. I think there are quite a few opportunities there to innovate. So we look at it both in terms of directly servicing the oil field as well as some of the indirect. And the presentation has a couple suggestions as to what some of those can be.
Okay. I have a question here. Adding to this great presentation of Ramble Logistics, quality and compliance relates to HSSE will not just be about keeping statistics, rather having systems in place to affect and manage operational risk, etc. Are you agree with that?
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I'll give a simple example. I remember in Guyana, working on a tender for taxi services, right? Sounds very simple. But it's so rigorous with these multinationals. For example, they will ask questions like, if you get a flat tire on the road, show us the documented process about what you will do, right? So you can't just say, we'll get out and change the tire, right? There has to be an actual document, a standard operating procedure that shows what will happen. And they look at those things. And those are the type of things that local companies may find themselves struggling with at first, because they definitely can change the tire. But having those things documented and so on is sometimes not very straightforward. And if you don't have experience in it, it could be challenging. And I gave a simple example, but of course with the more technical services, it becomes more and more difficult. Using the same example, drivers, are they defensive driving trained? Are they, and is it documented? And policies, are they trained in ways that you can actually show, not to use their cell phones and so on while driving? So these are some of the small things that local companies could find difficulty in if they're not aware. And that's part of the center, I guess, will help to educate them on that.
Mr. Frankel, Surinamese businesses in general has problems with issues regarding health, environmental, and safety procedures. Are you foreseeing maybe procedures, training, studies, whatever, to make Surinamese company stronger to overcome the challenges with regard to health, safety, and environmental backlogs that they have compared to maybe a foreign company?
Yes, this is exactly one of the activities that the Enterprise Development Center, which we envisage, will be executing, right? Giving targeted trainings, to local businesses to let's say to upgrade them, so they can be compliant with the requirements set by these international oil companies. What the Enterprise Development Center will not do, it will not certify these companies. For example, it could provide trainings with regard to quality, let's say ISO or whatnot, but the process of obtaining international certification will have to be conducted by the companies themselves, and they will have to pay for it, of course.
Okay. I'm getting some questions from our English audience outside of Suriname, reminding that the country's local content guidelines should, of course, not only target questioning oil and gas, but look far ahead and strategically plan a long term also for further development of other sectors in our country, for instance, agriculture. How do you think that can be fit?
Well, maybe I can comment on that. The government has already, let's say, picked up a coordinating role, right, to arrive at local content policy, where it is explicitly stated that the scope will not be only oil and gas, but the scope should cover, let's say, all sectors besides oil and gas, because it's a national thing, right? And so this coordinating role has been assumed by the Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Business. As a matter of fact, working groups were installed and are being commissioned to start with policy institutionalization and legislation on local content. So covering, let's say, all sectors besides the oil and gas.
Okay. Another question that came in, if we focus on the local content, it would also be good to look at what the local companies can offer or have to offer. If we already look at the port of, for example, Kuldeep Singh, who have developed their port to oil and gas standards instead of focusing on building a new shore base, can it be of any difference for the development of this sector? What is your opinion about that, Mr. Rasak?
Yeah, I mean, we have personally worked in Kuldeep Singh's port for quite a while, and they have put a lot of investment into making that facility standard of oil and gas, right? Of the operators. So there is an opportunity to use existing facilities. That's one of them. I know that there are some state-owned port facilities as well. And it's quite possible that you can have world-class shore base without a whole lot of new investments. Of course, there are some other technical challenges surrounding water depths and so on. But yes, definitely there are local existing facilities. In Guyana, the Guyana shore base was an extension of an existing port before, and all the other ports that are being used right now in oil and gas are existing facilities that were, more investment went into it. So none of the shore bases, they have actually been built from scratch as of yet. So I think that is a way to get it done faster, as well as possibly, not have as much investment as you might think you need. Yeah.
Okay, we have here a question of one of a Zoom participants. Full potential of the local content will be in the production phase. How much expats typically will reside here in Suriname? Dan, can you and any one of you address this question?
How much of the
expats? Full potential of local content will be in the production phase. How much expats typically will reside here in Suriname?
Okay. The expatriates. So when you start up these operations, like right now, if you look at the rigs offshore, more than likely the majority of the people, more than 90%, are probably expats. Yeah, they're foreigners and so on. If you look at the Guyana case, obviously it started off as 100% expatriates, and then over 2-3 years it started to rise, and maybe now the Guyana rigs are maybe half locals, right? So there are ways to get people who have very little experience and train them up rapidly. We've done that with some of our people to get them into that position, and we've actually been collaborating with Statsoli in the last couple of months to share some of that knowledge with them. So what the local content policies can do is sort of map out over a period of time how different types of positions should be going towards locals. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, all participants through the Zoom, kijkers en luisteraars, we naderen het eind van de live broadcast via de tv. De tijd is bijna genaderd. De vragen blijven binnenstromen, de vragen blijven binnenkomen. Het is een heel interessante discussie. En natuurlijk is het een discussie waar we nog uren mee zouden kunnen doorgaan. We weten hoe belangrijk en hoe ingrijpend dit is voor de Surinaamse economie en onze zakengemeenschap. Daarom is het laatste woord hierin nog niet gezegd. En gaat u nog heel veel presentaties en avonden als deze meemaken vanuit de Kamer van Koophandel en Fabrieken en natuurlijk de Stichting Surinamse Verbruikersraad. Nu gaan we voor nu deze uitzending wat de live TV betreft moeten afsluiten, beëindigen vanwege andere verplichtingen. Maar on de Zoom gaat deze meeting gewoon door en kunt u uw vragen door blijven voorwaarden. Al uw vragen krijgt u antwoorden daarop. En ik zou willen vragen aan het panel als ze nog iets hebben toe te voegen aan deze avond. Gentlemen, do you have anything that you want to add at the closure of this evening during this live broadcast to the television?
Yeah, just that, I know this has been broadcast live, so quite a few different people from the public are watching. Keep abreast of the information. Look at the news and the Guyana's websites and the Suriname news. Try to be involved and knowledgeable about what's happening. Read up about things. And keep aware of the opportunities, right? As these centers and so on start getting off the ground, make sure that you will pay attention, you find out what's going on. The chamber seems to be a very good resource for that as well. So I would say stay informed as much as possible.
Mr. Frankel, do you have anything?
Yes,
Any message?
One very important thing, education, but also this, especially not only higher education, but the core of the jobs, let's say the skilled jobs in the offshore, is technical vocation and vocational education and training. So obviously there is a task for us there and for the government to improve, let's say, and make our existing educational institutes such as NATIN more targeted towards the industry, and not only the oil and gas industry, but the let's say the industry in general. Yeah, so that students graduating from this institute have a smaller gap or have no gap in the ideal situation.
They're ready to fit.
They're fit for work at once. That is one, education. So, and the second thing, I would like to encourage, let's see, Surinamese entrepreneurs to actively pursue opportunities. One opportunity, because you may be aware that each person, who must physically work in the offshore needs certain safety trainings. Now, the bodies, because there are already Surinamese nationals working in the offshore at this time, but they need certain safety trainings, and for those trainings they have to go to Trinidad. So, how wouldn't it be nice if entrepreneurs started, let's say, this training facility in Suriname to train nationals to qualify for the offshore?
Thank you so much, Mr. Frankel. In this particular comment that you gave at your closure, I want to say that there is another business already in Suriname that are pulling already for some years in bringing information to the business community to get them ready for the oil and gas industry. And the name is OBTN Energy. They are also very hard, busy, doing all kinds of efforts to get the Surinamese business community ready for these actions that are coming in the coming future. Anyway, gentlemen, I want to thank you in behalf of the Chamber of Commerce, Stichting Verbruikersraad Suriname, and of course, RAMS Logistics, who is our partner in this, very much for your, I want to thank you so much for your participation, and I want to say till the next time. Dames en heren, kijkers en luisteraars, ook aan u heel hartelijk bedankt namens de Kamer van Koophandel en Stichting Verbruikersraad Suriname voor uw tijd en uw aandacht voor deze zaak. We zijn lang nog niet aan het eind van het verhaal. Dit is pas het begin. De Kamer van Koophandel gaat er gewoon mee door. U mag ook weten dat de Kamer van Koophandel al in planning heeft om voor het einde van 2021 een speciale business development unit op te zetten voor oil en gas specifieke zaken. Kijkt u dus uit, want er komen heel wat ontwikkelingen op dit vlak. We gaan nu uit de live uitzending, maar we zijn gewoon even nog bezig via de Zoom. Dus de mensen die nog vragen en dergelijke hebben, kunnen rustig hun vragen doorsturen via de Zoom-link. En ze krijgen een antwoord gegarandeerd. Mag ik u alle verder een fijne kijkavond toewensen en zeggen tot de volgende keer. Dank u.
Yeah.
Die vragen zijn op die app gestuurd voor mij. Hè?
Ja, kijk daar. Ook direct linken.
Yes, Oké.
Ifa. Momentje.
Microfoon.
Kunnen we beginnen? Ja. Ga je gang.
We should review evaluate our progress in this field at national level. Effectiveness of policies and systems developed, adjust as needed, and improve continuously. Renee, I think that it was OBT Energy, standby for audio. When questioning oil and gas industry hold tenders, do they publish this on a website or on a newspaper?
Do they publish? What was that? What do they publish?
When the oil and gas industry holds tender, do they publish this on a website or in the newspaper? Or we know we can apply to the tenders? How we will know we can apply to the tenders?
So if somebody is applying.
Yeah.
Okay.
So again, and that's something that so what could happen in some cases is that some companies only invite companies that they know about the tender, right? And that's one of the areas where locals could lose out. You want to encourage them to advertise it on a website. It could be through the government website. It could be on the newspaper. That's what one of the rules that the regulator should be trying to get done. So in Guyana, they have to publish now all their tenders through the Center for Local Business Development, and that's what you want. Otherwise, you could have it in the case of some things in Trinidad where it's not published anywhere. It's only directly invited to 2 or 3 companies, and there's no other way to get in there. Yeah.
Okay.
So how do we see that? If nobody knows how it's gonna.
That is one of the challenges we have as the regulator, because there is this constant, call it this constant tension, yeah, between these operators and their prime contractors and subcontractors. They prefer to work in their community of practice, right? Yeah. And because they want to make progress. Mm-hmm. So they would not be inclined to, let's say, allocate resources to qualify local businesses. Yeah, so that is a hurdle that needs to be taken, and basically it takes some commitment from these operators, because in the ideal situation, what you would want is that each and every tender, yeah, is published locally as well. Well, to not each and every, prior to a tender, an expression of interest that local businesses are invited to submit expression of interest to be qualified, right? And that they actually perform that effort. Yes. So that is work in progress that we are doing with the international companies active here.
How did Trinidad go with that in the beginning, that outside companies came?
I think Trinidad's case is a bit unique in the sense that we started oil production 100 years ago, long before there were standards for anything, for safety, for anything like that. And it evolved over time where it's not like now where you get into the industry where people know what's the right thing and the best practice, you know.
No.
It happens slowly. Some companies got, local companies, entrepreneurs, they realized what they should do. They partnered with international companies and they got business. And a lot of the others were just never aware, right? And they just figured the oil industry was something that they cannot touch. And many of them have been excluded for a long time. So even a company like Ramps, we have struggled to get business in Trinidad, right? Despite all the experience we have in the region. Because as Eddie said, they like to keep work sometimes within the family of companies that they know. You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
When the oil is extracted in 2025, how much will it contribute estimated growth to the Surinamese economy? What is the expectation?
Well, David indicated, let's say, at the price of let's put it this way: the initial oil production in 2025 will be ramped up to, let's say, 120,000 barrels a day, right? Which is in a year, I guess roughly maybe 60 million barrels, but I'm not that good at yeah. So on an annual basis, it will add up to 43.
That's barrels. So if you have multiplied by $70, then you're looking at about
$3 billion a year.
3 billion
revenue.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
that has to be that they have to take out the cost of it first to get into, and then split the remainder profit between the government. And,
So what is the potential? The potential of, let's say, our resources are estimated over let's say the full life cycle are estimated to be the government income is estimated to be around somewhere between, I guess, $20 billion and $40 billion
That's
Impressive.
over a 20 years period.
20 period.
Impressive. Impressive for such a small nation. It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
So, you have another question over there?
No.
Okay. So the local businesses in Suriname, if they certify, your experience, you think they will get the job?
So again, even when we say certified, we have to understand that there is no standard for these companies that it applies to all of them, right?
There is no standard.
So when I say Exxon may have certain requirements for certain things, and Total may have different requirements. There's no international standard that all of them agree to for everything. However, stuff like ISO standard tends to satisfy most of them in many different areas. But for example, we've seen cases where something that was good for one operator is not good enough for another, right? Because they themselves have their own internal procedures and qualification requirements and so on.
Okay. For what I would like to know, who's Exxon? Exxon is an American company?
Yeah, so
And Total is?
So Exxon and Total are both in the top 5 international oil companies in the world, right? Exxon is actually number 1, I believe, in international oil companies. They're American. Total is French.
Total is French.
Yeah, they're French.
Some questions coming in.
Yeah.
Mr. Dennis Neelam put the following question for answer. What are the first steps for an educational institute to start with the providing courses and training? Are there any low-hanging fruits?
What did Trinidad do and what Suriname is going to do?
So for education and training. So for example, there is this skills training, yeah. Or even let's say the lowest. Not call it the lowest, but there obviously you have some skills skilled labor, yeah, necessary. One very obvious one, during the construction of all these under subsea structures, you will need a lot of welding, but they have to be certified, these welders. So it is of the utmost importance that we can provide certified welders in the country. So obviously, if we could develop such training here, yes, it will already open opportunities to the local workforce.
But is something like that already in the pipeline to be executed, to be established, a school, a training center? Or
Well, there are no concrete actions as yet. But to give you an example, I mean, the concept of local content is not new to Suriname. When we had, let's say, Alcoa here, starting in the 50s, 60s, the expat percentage was relatively large, and gradually more, let's say, Surinamese nationals got, let's say, qualified to work for that industry. So, and also in our refinery, when Stats fully built the refinery, we had the same challenge that we would want, let's say, a maximum number of local labor active working on the construction. So what we did in that particular instance, we engaged with a local outfit, with a institute, the SAO, Stichting voor Arbeidsontwikkeling, and we facilitated them, and they conducted the training, for the welders, and we brought in, let's say, a qualified, how do you call it? A certified person who was able to issue these certifications.
Okay.
Yeah. So obviously
There's some local, some small low-hanging fruit like that in skills training, and at the higher end of it, you want to look at the technical programs at university, right? Petroleum engineers, petroleum geologists and geophysicists, petroleum economists, and lawyers and auditors who understand petroleum finance and so on. So those are the ones that are a higher level that especially will be required by the regulatory side.
Okay.
You're talking about lawyers in petroleum industry?
Specialized in law.
Yeah.
So that's another study that has to develop locally.
So
lawyers.
Exactly. So like in Trinidad's case, BP and the other operators, they began, when they realized that they needed petroleum geologists and so on, they were always American or British or whatever. They decided in 2000 that they were going to create a program with the University of the West Indies, and from that program, they have supplied themselves continuously with the majority of the high-level technical people that they've needed in Trinidad, to the point where BP began exporting the Trinidadians to other countries, right? And that is the kind of thing that can be done here. And in fact, Suriname has a great geology program already. It's to really integrate modules into that now, to do with oil and gas. I mean, Statsoli's full subsurface unit is full of them from this program. So it's already here.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, do you think that it is a need to get a special ministry dedicated to oil and gas? What is the experience in Guyana and Trinidad regarding a special ministry?
So in Guyana's case, when they initially started, they put petroleum under the Ministry of Natural Resources, which really was always responsible for mining, right? So they realized soon after that mining and oil and gas was a bit different. They needed to have a special department, so they created a Department of Energy. And that Department of Energy is still being fleshed out, but there is that. In Trinidad, there is a Ministry of Energy that is responsible for all extractive sectors, including oil and gas, as well as mining and quarrying. So in this case, in the Suriname case, it's a little bit different. Eddie can probably explain a bit about what they want to do in terms of stats.
Well, in the Suriname case, let's say the oil and gas sector resides under the Ministry of Natural Resources, but the circumstance in Suriname is that as early as the 80s, the government by law enacted Staatsolied, our national oil company. Because in what you will see in some countries is that the institutional function for the oil and gas sector resides within a ministry, yeah, as part of the government. But we made in a fairly early stage, we made the decision in Suriname to bring the institutional function into a separate entity, which is Staatsolied. So I guess from that perspective, there is no urgency, no need to have a separate ministry of oil and gas.
Great. That is a very good point of view. Please don't focus so much on the money. When our population is vastly underdeveloped, regulation and governance is weak, and people need better paying jobs to sustain a healthier life of future, somebody is having some concerns. Please don't focus so much on the money. When our population is vastly underdeveloped, regulation and governance is weak, and people need better paying jobs to sustain healthier life and future. That is just a remark that somebody makes. It's not so much a question, but somebody make that remark. Maybe at the technical schools such as the NATAN and PTC, should the focus be more on oil education in their curriculum? Is that the idea?
Sure.
There should be some of it, definitely. You don't want to now make all your programs only about oil and gas, because the same skills for welding and for operating equipment and rigging and lifting will be applicable to any industry. So yes, make sure that they are aware of petroleum industry and they understand and they have some parts of it, but not so specialized that they will not be able to work in other sectors, you know.
Mm-hmm.
We have such a small population in Suriname. Will we be able to fill in all the jobs that will become vacant after this industry has started? What are your opinions, gentlemen?
Well,
or are we going to have to use outside labor?
That
to
is
fill
a
it?
valid question. Indeed, one can indeed ask themselves if we will be able to supply the labor in sufficient amounts. Yeah, and maybe not only for the oil and gas, but if you're talking about, let's say, some sort of broader economic development, industrial development in the country, we do have let's say a very shortage, limited
of labor people.
Yes.
So I'll put it like this, right? Trinidad has 1.4, 1.5 million people. All the oil and gas labor in the entire country is probably 20,000 people. So you don't actually, the oil and gas industry doesn't actually employ a lot of people in a general sense. The most people that will get employed coming out of oil and gas is in the indirect sectors, construction, and so on.
People related to the oil industry.
Yes.
Labor force that are related to.
But directly involved in oil and gas will be
Minimal.
yeah, maybe a couple thousands, even at the maximum case. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now, I've seen that now all the questions have stopped. They came to an end. I think that the people have asked as much as possible. Gentlemen, rest me to say to you a lot of thanks for this evening. It was very educative and very forward-looking to what is coming in the short future to Suriname. By the way, there's still a small question that came in during the broadcast. Mr. Frankel, can you give any idea about the quality that is expected to be found in the offshore basin, the quality of the oil? Do you have
in a broad sense, the oil is a relatively light and sweet crude. So it's a high value crude oil. High value crude oil.
Okay,
Yes.
Just like Guyana as well.
Yes.
That question came in, but we didn't get the opportunity, the chance to bring it on during the live broadcast. Anyway, it was very interesting. Just like I said, this is just the beginning.
Yeah.
This is more addressed to the President of the Chamber of Commerce. It's a long way to success, and it's a long way to getting really the business community ready. So we're going to be busy for a while. Gentlemen, I do hope that in the next future we may always do a call on you
Sure.
with your expertise and your knowledge and know-how about this sector. And if we ask you, please do your contribution also next time, because it seems that the people has liked it very much.
Very good.
Really enjoy it.
Very good.
Anyway, thank you so much, and we will see you till the next time again.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
People have a lot of questions, eh?
Yeah.
Good, that's good.
That's good.
I noticed the last time I was here as well that a lot of the public seem very interested here compared to in Guyana. They don't seem as interested to be. They kind of just want to read comments on Facebook and stuff.
Yeah.
Even in Trinidad, but I realize a lot of the business community here is very. They want to be involved. They want to know what's going on.
Meneer Frankel,
Ja.
just between you and me,
Ja.
waarom is de hele wereld in Houston nu? En waarom is Suriname zo onderbezet daar?
Dus eigenlijk voel ik me een beetje gênant om daar antwoord op te geven. Dus, want ik heb mezelf die vraag ook gesteld.
Die vraag is gekomen, maar ik durf het niet te brengen.
Ah,
Die vraag is gekomen, maar ik
is
durf het
gekomen,
niet te
hè?
brengen.
Ah.
Want ik vind het politiek een gevoelige
Ik
vraag.
weet het niet, dus nog gênanter.
Die vraag is hier gekomen van, de hele wereld zit nu bij oil and gas in Houston. Waarom is Suriname daar zo ondervertegenwoordigd? Dat is
Ik moet tot mijn schaamte bekennen dat ik persoonlijk niet op de hoogte was van dat die conference ging. Maar ik moet aan mijn PR, aan mijn communication department vragen. Waarom we het niet weten? Huh? En waarom we niet daar zijn. Toch?
Ja, want een vraag komt, maar je moet durfputten in
Nee,
de uitzending.
maar de
Het
embarrassing.
zijn
We
toch
zijn bezig met informatie.
Dus je moet... je
Daarom
moet-
ben ik van dat ik van SB Business Forum moet je even niet zeggen. We zijn even de mensen
Ja.
aan het
Maar ik vond het een heel gevoelige vraag toch, van de hele wereld is nu in Houston,
Oh,
Texas.
no.
Maar waarom is Suriname daar nergens te bekennen of ondervertegenwoordigd?
Hij mee waar niet.
No boy,
Nou,
mevrouw,
laten we terug aan de
zo
keer.
nou wachten op me. Daarom, dit tak meer bahaya san.
Wat is nou een koppeling? Ja,
Nee.
Kom je, Piet. Ja, nu kan je vrij lopen. Even en dan laten we verder.
Ja.
Thank you very much. Good to meet you.
Yes, do you have a business card?
I haven't had a card in a long time.
Yeah, but I'm afraid I don't have any of my cards with me.
I haven't had.
Nee.
Kunt u mij even daarop brengen? Nee, dat je informatie wat met hem.
Oké, is goed.
I have an old card.
Oké.
It's an old card. I haven't needed a card in 2 years.
Oké,
But you know my email.
de contact. Oké, thank you. Ik heb helaas geen kaart bij me.
Geen probleem, ik heb alleen e-mails.
Oh, oké.
Ja, ik ben alleen e-mails waar ik ook mee ben.
Oké. Ja, zo zie je maar, hè.
Even contact met mij.
Dennis Pello. Oh, oké. Ja.
Yeah?
Hey, alsjeblieft. Graag gedaan. Ja. Oké.
Hartelijk dank, nou nog contact. Ja, als er iets is dan...
Ja.
Oh, yeah, because you want to yes.